Hello, I'm here today using some isolation time to do an unscientific and highly subjective comparison between the MeFOTO RoadTrip Classic tripod, the aluminum version, against the Peak Design Travel Tripod carbon fiber. So let's take a look. To give a little perspective, I've been doing landscape and travel photography for the last 5 or 6 years, most of it spent with the Road Tripper as my primary tripod. So keep in mind that it's viewed through that lens as somebody traveling, usually light, on hiking trails, multi-day treks, and sometimes through airports. So first off, I'll do a little overview of the MeFOTO RoadTrip. In general, probably every review you read online is going to say, pretty good tripod, good bang for the buck, and I would be inclined to agree with that. It has a little bit of everything, but doesn't necessarily shine in any of them, but for the price, it's hard to argue against it. For me, it gets tall enough. I think it was just about 6 feet. It packs down just about small enough. It goes, I think, about 12 inches or so. And overall, it's just built pretty well. It's got a standard ball head, maybe one too many leg elements for it to be super sturdy at the max height, but it's good enough. The twist locks, I don't find them very reliable. There's quite often where I would notice one of them had opened up and started dangling behind me when it's in my backpack. I did have 2 complaints, and they were the main reasons why I was looking for an upgrade. The first one is the amount of time it would take to deploy or take down the tripod. And the second is basically just the shape of the ball head. I would often find it getting caught on branches when I was walking on tighter trails. And it just made navigating the terrain a little bit more difficult. So anything looking forward that I thought could remove that element, I was definitely keen on checking out. Now we'll contrast that to the Peak Design Travel Tripod, which I counted as having 5 primary differences. So the first difference is the physical dimensions. So there's 2 aspects of this in my view. One is that it is physically more narrow. So for me, when I am hiking or traveling, I typically have my tripod in a side pocket. So having it more narrow makes it much easier to slide into that side pocket. When I would use the road trip, I would typically have just 2 legs in the side pocket, and then the third would be hanging about, and that just made it more likely to get caught on things and generally would be a nuisance. The second piece is that it has a shorter center column. And for me, that's not a huge deal breaker, but at its max height, I do find the Peak Design tripod to be more stable. The second point, pretty straightforward, the weight. It weighs less, it's smaller, so over long journeys, it is quite easily going to be more comfortable to have with you. And that is not a huge difference in weight, but having a lighter tripod is always going to be an advantage. The third point is the very unique ball head. So this design is completely different than anything on the market, at least that I'm aware of. I like it in a few different ways. One, it's just more convenient to use. I like being able to just spin it clockwise or counterclockwise to lock and unlock it. Makes things very straightforward. And just in general, when it's in my backpack, I find it getting caught on less things. So that's another bonus. The fourth piece is the leg design. So there's a few differences here versus the road trip. Number one, and most important to me, is the leg locks. So having these quick release, I find just easier and better in every way. It's never a case where, oh, I think it's locked and then it slides open and then it's dangling about. This, it's closed, you know it, it's locked in place, there's no second guessing it. It's much faster to pop open. Yeah, I just love these. They're perfect to me. Second piece is the number of leg sections. So I believe they are the same as the road trip. On both of these, the bottom leg section is very small and kind of flimsy, so I don't always trust them that much. But to have the extra height and you're in a bind, it's always nice to have. The other thing is the leg angle. So the road trip has 2 leg angles, one kind of standard width and then a more wide width to lower the minimum height on the tripod. So these ones I find go much wider. It's getting close to 90 degrees, so it can get very low. And for me, that is most of my use cases. It's either going to be standard or extremely low to the ground for ultra wide stuff. That I just find very handy. And last but not least, the fifth point. That is the fact that the center column is actually adjustable. So that's going back to the point I just made about the minimum height that it can go. So with the Peak Design tripod, you're actually able to remove this bottom part of the center column so that you're left with just this maybe 2 or 3 inch section, making the minimum height of the tripod when you do so extremely low. And it's not that I use that terribly often, but having the ability when I really want to, I find that extremely useful. And it's something that having the very long center column on the MeFOTO, it's just not really easily able to replicate that without going upside down. As one other quick comparison, let's see a side-by-side of the deployment time. Okay, so it's looking like conclusion time. And you're probably gonna ask, so which do you recommend? And ultimately the answer is both, because it depends who you are. If you're like me a couple years ago, you have a more limited budget, you don't necessarily get out too much, and you just want something that works. For me, that is the MeFOTO RoadTrip. It does everything pretty well, costs a reasonable amount, and doesn't leave that much to complain about. However, if you have a bit of a bigger budget, you appreciate all of those quality life improvements that I mentioned, then it's really worth considering the Peak Design. So let me know what you think, and if you have either of these tripods or even have something entirely different that you would recommend, let me know. Cheers.